I'm Ricky Ott, and we are back now with the second part of Lesson 2, Activating My Democracy on Values, Wealth, and Our Rights. We're going to dive right in to the Bill of Rights. This is for middle school, and we start with a TED Ed video that kind of rapidly goes through all 10 of our Bill of Rights and explains in an interesting way for youth what these are. So after this film, what we do in this lesson is go through each one individually and with exercises for each one. What we're going to do in this session today is highlight some of the ones that are more in-depth than some of the others. So for example, like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and thought and expression, really. I use a photograph here. A photograph is used, and the question is, with a partner, read the Bill of Rights, read the First Amendment, and decide what 5 First Amendment rights are actually being expressed and used by people at this rally, this women's rally. And then there's a group activity, and of course they've identified all of the 5 rights. Religion, freedom of religion, peaceful assembly, our ability to exercise our voice as free speech, petition for redress. We have some grievances that we want the government to pay attention to. We'd like these to be fixed, addressed, and of course the media was all over the place. So for this rally, each Bill of Rights, there's either an activity or an explanation along with a reading, because sometimes this might be the first introduction of middle school students to the Bill of Rights. In our case, we're going to go to and this is all self-explanatory in the free lesson materials. The Fifth Amendment, due process and fair treatment in court. That was a little short on the film. The film only mentions one, what? And the answer is not that, this. It just mentions that I plead the Fifth, which a lot of people might be familiar with from watching TV shows about trials and stuff, and that is the right not to testify against yourself. That's fair treatment in court, our Fifth Amendment right. Another Fifth Amendment right we're going to look at. So imagine, remember in our Declaration of Independence where we looked and read the entitlement to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's amazingly useful to ask people now to go find life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in the Fifth Amendment. So the small groups are all looking to see where this is in the Fifth Amendment. They're reading the Fifth Amendment, and what do you discover is it's not there. It's not there. And instead, what is there is the right to life, liberty, and property. And I will say that when I was teaching this to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, one school, there was some little voices that said, "What? Boy, they sure got that wrong." And why would that student have said that? So it opens an opportunity to explore what types of wealth are these 2 different things, pursuit of happiness and property. And they actually represent very different types of wealth. So the point of this examination, this little inquiry, is that the Bill of Rights actually reflects the values of the people who wrote them. And that's something to keep in mind, is that all of our laws, all of our rights, when they're actually written, they reflect the values of the people who are actually writing them. And that might be different from ours. We skip ahead now to the 9th and 10th Amendments, which are kind of a summary about other natural rights that we have. The 9th Amendment is incredibly difficult to read, but it's the right to claim other rights not listed in the Constitution. And the 10th is about reserved powers. It limits the power of the federal government by saying that there are powers reserved to the states and to the people. So let's look at that sharing of power among the state and the federal governments. So for example, if we're going to, who has the power to declare war? The states or the federal government? And this is a callback activity, call response. You just do it in the open classroom or a community workshop. So declare war is a federal power. We go through about 4 or 5 of these. The power to collect taxes. Well, okay, states have that, but the federal government now also has it. Oh, local taxes are state. The power to coin money. Can any old state do that? No. So really there's some sharing of power that goes on, and it's spelled out in the Constitution. Police and fire departments, who's responsible for maintaining those? Does the federal government come when you call 911? No. So that's a state power. How about establishing post offices? Federal. And decide who gets to vote. This is a point of confusion at first. It's actually the states get to decide who votes, but the federal government can set some overarching rules. The federal government or the people by amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment is a little bit outside the scope of the Bill of Rights, but it's also important to understand in the context of the Bill of Rights. Here's why. The Bill of Rights was originally intended as powers for the people to use against their federal government. And here were states that weren't allowing people to vote and had all these other kinds of things going on, and people wanted the Bill of Rights to apply also against their state government. So the 14th Amendment gets passed, no Bill of Rights in the state government. But the 14th Amendment recognizes 4 new rights in Section 1, just in Section 1. The idea here is to have a small group activity, read the legal vocab when you come across it in Section 1. What are these new words, privileges and immunities? What do they mean? Be ready to explain what you've learned, and then let's have a discussion. So everybody wades through the Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. The first 3 rights in Section 1 are the right of citizenship to people who are born or naturalized in the United States or its territories. Privileges and immunities for citizens, which gives people the same treatment, guarantees people the same treatment and rights in all states. So when you go from one to another, you have your rights intact with you, ideally. And the third one is due process. Due process is fair treatment and equal access under law. And what this due process clause did was it pulled the 5th Amendment has due process in it in the Bill of Rights. It tied to the 5th Amendment due process clause and basically pulled the entire Bill of Rights, incorporated most of it into state law as well. So now people have these rights to use against the state. The 4th right recognized in the 14th Amendment was equal protection of the laws. This is about equality. It is not mentioned, equality is not mentioned in our Constitution, in our Bill of Rights. It's mentioned in the Declaration, our statement of principles, but it was not pulled into law as these other rights were. And in fact, it was another 80 years. So the 14th Amendment was like 1860s, okay? It wasn't until almost 100 years, actually, and the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s that the Supreme Court began to expand its interpretation of what equality meant, and the civil rights acts and case law from the courts pulled 14th Amendment equal protection under law to also be part of due process as our 5th Amendment right under the Bill of Rights in federal law. So these are entwined now. Our Bill of Rights is kind of mirrored of both our federal and state government. Equal protection, due process, it's parallel rights in both federal and state governments. And at this point, this is actually we end this lesson with a film with Takaya Blaney, who's a Salama First Nation individual from British Columbia. But she has a 2-minute proclamation that is just a declaration of her rights, her powers, what her rights mean, and it just kind of pulls everything together and takes it up a notch, because what Takaya is talking about is our culture, our future, our bodies, our stories, our medicine, our plants. And then this 12-year-old starts spinning off treaty rights and law that actually codified these cultural principles into legally enforceable law in the current culture. What this also serves to do is, especially with youth, is show that what we value is actually what we need to survive. And that's not usually thought about. I mean, some of the youth are like, they value being able to watch videos and stuff like that. So this makes a very much deeper discussion of what our values actually are, in terms of what we need to protect for not only our health and well-being, but that of future generations. And that is the end of Lesson 2, Ultimate Civics.